All right, today we're going to trace the journey of a single ancient ritual. It's a story that starts with a physical mark, but as you'll see, it ends up as a profound metaphor for the very nature of the human heart.
So how in the world does an external, physical act evolve to mean something so deeply internal and spiritual? That's the core question we're digging into today. It's really a story of shadows and reality, of the body and the spirit. To really get a handle on this, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, to the book of Genesis, where this act is first laid out, not as some cultural tradition, but as a divine sign. So here it is, the foundational command given to Abraham. And let's be clear, this isn't a suggestion. It's presented as the physical, permanent sign of an eternal covenant, a binding agreement between God and its people. Okay, so what are we actually talking about physically? It's a specific act. But the text makes it clear from the get-go that its meaning was always supposed to be way more than skin deep. Think of it as a visible reminder, literally etched in the flesh, of a sacred promise. And they weren't kidding around about this. The stakes were incredibly high. This wasn't optional. To be uncircumcised meant being cut off. Basically, you were out. It was a non-negotiable marker of who belonged. So from here, we're going to see how this sign, which started as a personal family thing, just expands to define the identity of an entire nation, especially during these really critical moments in their story.
Now this is where things get really intense. The source points to this dramatic, kind of mysterious event. Moses, the guy chosen to lead his people out of Egypt, is suddenly confronted by God, and his life is on the line.
And what was the problem? It turns out his own son hadn't been circumcised. The leader of the nation had neglected the foundational sign of the covenant in his own home. At that moment, the personal and the national were completely tied together. The leader had to embody the covenant before he could lead the people. Wow, talk about high stakes. Zipporah's quick thinking and decisive action saves her husband's life. This bridegroom of blood moment just hammers home the life-or-death importance that was attached to this ritual.
Okay, fast forward a few decades, and this whole idea comes roaring back, but on a massive scale. After 40 years wandering in the wilderness, an entire generation had grown up without receiving the sign. And now, as they're standing right on the edge of the promised land, the practice has to be renewed.
And you've got to understand, this wasn't just about checking a box. This was a huge, symbolic act of national purification. It was about spiritually and physically shedding that identity of being slaves in Egypt and fully stepping into their new identity as a nation in covenant with God.
But right around here, something really big starts to happen. A major shift. The prophets take this very physical concept and they turn it completely inward. The focus moves from the body to the spirit, from the flesh to the heart. This right here, this is the pivot point of the whole story. The prophets started to argue that the external act was, well, meaningless, totally hollow if it wasn't matched by an internal change. What good is an outward sign if the heart is stubborn and disobedient?
So they started using this incredible, powerful language. They reframed stubbornness and pride as a kind of spiritual uncircumcision. To have an uncircumcised heart meant you were closed off, unable to really connect with God. And this metaphor, it just kept growing. It wasn't just about a stubborn heart. You could have uncircumcised ears, meaning you were just incapable of truly hearing God's word. The idea was that your very ability to have a relationship with God depended on this inner state of openness. All right, let's jump forward to the New Testament because this is where this powerful metaphor evolves into its final theological meaning, and it totally redefines the whole concept for a new era.
So the Apostle Paul comes along and he essentially reframes this entire history. He says, look, the physical act, that was just a shadow. It was a symbol pointing forward to a greater reality. And that reality, he says, is a spiritual transformation that makes the old shadow obsolete. And now baptism becomes the new sign of this inner change.
And this quote just nails the new definition. True circumcision, in this view, is a spiritual surgery done by God on the heart, not a physical act done by a person on the body. It's about cutting away that old sinful nature.
Okay, so after this whole journey, from the flesh to the heart, what does this mean for who actually belongs in this covenant? Well, we get a final and pretty radical redefinition of identity itself. And what's so interesting here is how this completely decouples spiritual identity from your physical family tree or from any ritual. True identity, according to this, isn't about what people see on the outside, but about the condition of your heart on the inside. a change that's made by the Spirit.
And that really brings us to the end of this incredible story. A ritual that started as a literal physical mark on one family, evolved into a national symbol, and finally transformed into this universal metaphor for the change of heart that faith requires.
So that leaves us with one final thought. While specific rituals might change or fade away, that underlying human quest for a real inner transformation, for a circumcised heart, well, that remains a timeless and deeply relevant question for every single one of us.